Greetings to you viewers from across the globe. You're welcome to the show Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. I'm your host, as always, Odiawa AI for Veegil Media. You will do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Veegil Media. Thanks. Now, on today's subject matter, we will be talking about the country's borrowing spree. Now, which country now in question now? I'm talking about the nation Nigeria. There's no country who is not in debt, from the world powers or the developed nations to the underdeveloped nations or developing nations. Now, what are the sources of government borrowings now in the country? Government borrowings are in a form of domestic debt sourced internally by issuing securities, bonds, federal government development stocks, treasury bills, and certificates. While external debts or foreign debts are generated from institutions such as World Bank and the IMF. When I mean IMF, I'm talking about the International Monetary Fund. Now, according to the Debt Management Office, a government agency established centrally to coordinate the management of Nigeria's debts, Nigeria's total public debt stock as at June 30th, 2023 was $113.42 billion. Now, if we would now translate that to Naira, we're talking about 87.38 trillion Naira, which is quite alarming. Now, the question I want to ask now is, in each administration, in a 4 or 8 years tenure, we always have what we always hear this Abacha loot. There has been so much sarcasm that whereby Abacha, from wherever he is, may so continue to rest in peace, a one-time head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, would disburse funds to the nation. Now, I just chose to deviate a bit by asking now, what exactly are these funds which were locked in accounts in several nations actually being used for upon disbursements back to the country? Now, falling back into the borrowing spree now, it comprises total domestic and external debts of the federal government of Nigeria, the 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory inclusively. What are the funds actually being used for, the Abacha loots? If they can be channeled towards meaningful resources, generating internal revenue, I don't think there'll be any need to be borrowing funds from either the World Bank or the IMF in each administration that comes into office. Now, with all this currently at hand, there has been no let-up in Nigeria's borrowing spree from the World Bank and IMF, as I said earlier on, and other money-related organizations, because as of last week, the chief executive requested the Senate to approve another $7.8 billion, another loan of close to 100 million euros, coming after his 2.18 trillion supplementary budget approval that was likely to partly be financed by these loans. Now, in the country's financial health, in my own view, my own opinion, the country's health is looking feebler, turning more or less into a vegetable that cannot even provide nutrients. The executive and the legislative arm should adopt a more cautious approach, in my own view, to this debt, seeking other means of generating revenue. We've got resources here, no doubt about that, materially and human-wise. How well have we tapped into these resources? Now, captured under a budget plan by the immediate past administration, the president explained that the funds would be used to finance diverse projects. Now, these diverse projects, which will be specific to emphasize on infrastructure, agriculture, health, education, water supply, security, and employment, as well as financial management reforms. But evidently, I seem not to see any improvement in these areas, because if we would fall back to, what are they calling it, the health sector, we could see that there's a drastic brain drain in this past administration when it comes to funding that health sector. The education aspect is no doubt a dilapidated sector. We hear the hike in fees. We hear the students are not even able to even fund their way while in higher institution as we speak. Now you're talking about the agriculture. Don't come giving me palliatives, because I won't take that, because those palliatives are only short-term and not long-term. Once whatever you give me is going to obey the law of digestion, where I take it in and it's going to obey the excretion process at the end of the day. And I forget about that. What are the sustainable goals now which we need to effect, instead of just borrowing here and there, left, right, and center? Now, moving further, He said that they will be implemented in the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory and were based on technical economic valuations and were expected contributions to the country's socio-economic development, including job creation, entrepreneurship, poverty reduction, and food security. Now, my question is, when you find yourself in a particular climate, where there's all forms of insecurity, from job insecurity, food insecurity, and utter destitution all over the place, how will the climate be fair enough for one to even create the jobs when those funds which you've already collected as loans are not disbursed to or utilized in a proper manner, rather? These are questions we should ask, or food for thought, like I always say, which we need to wine and dine about in our brains. It's sad enough that we have these resources, like I began by saying earlier on, human and material or even natural resources, but they are yet to be tapped. Now, Nigeria is at a critical juncture. The economy is tumultuous, no doubt about that. Poverty and hunger is afflicting so many along the way. Businesses are battered and infrastructure is inadequate and also obliterated or dilapidated. Inflation is another aspect, as it has hit 26.72% in September. And food inflation, we're in November currently. Now, food inflation has also skyrocketed to 30.64%. The last credible official jobless rate, or unemployment rate rather, is 33.3%. Now, how can all these be addressed with all these loans? If we have the proper people coming into power, knowing how they can utilize these funds upon collecting these loans, which are accruing into endless debts, how do we make sure that all these debts are taken care of? Now, public finances also are wretched, while expenditure is also ballooning. What I mean by ballooning is increasingly, we're amazed by the rate at which the expenditures is increasing or are increasing, but we seem not to lift a finger about the situation. We tend to be comfortable about what is going on. Now, revenue inflows are also narrowing, and the main export earner, which is crude oil, is beset with production hitches and massive plundering. Now, if we can, along the line, pay attention to all these natural resources, material resources rather, and human resources, I don't think we should go about borrowing from nations when in fact we are yet to even tap what we have. I'll use a vehicle now as typical example. We have the IBM, which is indigenously made. Now, this indigenous vehicle now is hardly patronized by Nigerians. And there should be a hidden clause which people are aware about and they wish not to even, blow a whistle on the matter. But instead, they choose the Bentleys, they choose the BMs or the Benzes. What happened to your own made in Nigeria, locally made product? Now, another question is, these are Abacha loots, like I began by mentioning earlier on, which is actually being disbursed now, which were carted away in the 90s. How well have they been utilized? Now, these are accruing debts should not raise their ugly heads when funds which were looted are being disbursed. Or are these nations acting as guardians, dictating our expenditure over these looted funds, which were carted away yesteryears? These are questions we should continue to ask and also, shed more spotlight on our opinions or views concerning this besetting situation upon the nation. Join me in the next phase of the show. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show is Viewpoint.
Greetings to you viewers from across the globe. You're welcome to the show Viewpoint.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Adiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show is Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and a dialogue. On the show today, in the first phase of the show, we took time to talk about the need to put an end to the borrowing spree of the nation. Now, while the World Bank said the federal government spent 96.3% of its revenue on debt servicing in 2022, the government's budget's implementation report in 2022 indicates that 106% of realized revenue was not actually utilized. Well, on the contrary, the executive arm believes that the nation's parlor state makes the borrowing inevitable rather. Now, why is this borrowing inevitable if we have resources at our disposal, which we've refused to tap into? Now, his predecessor, Muhammad Buhari, took Nigeria's total public debt stock from 12.11 trillion naira in June 2015 to 87.38 trillion as at June 2023. Now, the current administration has since taken the baton on May 29 and has been taking delivery of previously negotiated loans and new ones. These are inherited debts, which included adding up to his few months in office. Now, precisely 809.5 billion naira package that the included 500 billion palliative was recently approved. Multilateral agencies pleased with the present administration's uncritical swallowing of their standard prescription of the notable petroleum subsidy removal and the flotation of the naira, which has been dangling even more loans to mitigate the, these effects. Now, these effects of the petroleum subsidy removal and the flotation of the naira on its own part has been suffering all sorts of, capsizing and hijacking or turbulence, you can name it. Not to talk about the fuel subsidy, removal. Its removal has adversely affected homes when it comes to the basic necessities of life. When it comes to maybe your rent, your clothing, even your feeding. Now, for you to even make your commute from point A to point B, depending on the distance, you cannot. Why? Because drastically, this removal has affected it. But we've been promised that in the long run, we will feel the effects positively. We're still waiting on that. Now, moving on further, the African Development Bank is also offering $1 billion and the World Bank is also offering $2 billion. The IMF also, which is well known for granting us, loans, has also said they will also be granting their loans. Now, the question now arises, we keep collecting these loans. My question is, have they been properly being utilized? What actually are we using it for? Fine, you're to use them for infrastructure, agriculture, job creations, or whatever securities or insecurities that need to be addressed. But how well have they been addressed? When it comes to the security aspects, we witness the southeastern part, the northern part. Of course, fine, the southwest appears to be calm for the time being. We hope that all these insecurities do not spread, but yet still, the southwest is not left out when it comes to the plague of this food insecurity and job insecurity, which is nationwide. Now, but all this now, which the IMF and the African Development Bank and the World Bank has said, comes with a price, because in my own view, there's nothing even free in Freetown. Well, because the debt to the GDP ratio of 21.6% as of March 2023 appears comfortably compared to the African average of 24%. Saving cost, which has become prohibitive. Quite annoying. Now, it's quite justifiable that the Debt Management Office, I began by stating earlier on, the Debt Management Office is an agency in the Nigerian system whereby they are saddled with the responsibility of managing the nation's debt. Now, they are alarmed in its debt in an analysis report of the last decade. It said the debt servicing to revenue ratio had increased to 73.5%. thereby exceeding the government's own ceiling of 40%. It's quite alarming. Eyebrows should be raised concerning this issue and jaws should be dropped in awe concerning this issue. In my own view, in my own opinion, I will conclude by saying I will describe this as being unsustainable. Furthermore, it cannot support higher levels of borrowing. I will implore Mr. President and his team to therefore be creative. There must be other alternatives also to this debt acquisition, such as privatization and concession of public enterprises undertaken with professionalism, honesty, and focus to raise revenues and attract foreign domestic private investment. Not forgetting also, ongoing tax reforms should enhance productivity and investments and dramatically widen the tax and make sure that total compliance when it comes to tax reforms are actually complied to. Because we see people who evade tax. If we will recall the Panama incident, whereby people who refuse to even pay tax are generating funds from here and taking over to foreign countries and stacking it up there, and thereby leaving the nation here in a dilapidated state. It is my own view, my opinion, that my suggestions will be adhered to resolutely with immediate effect, so at least it douses the tensions in which the borrowing effect now has actually caused the nation. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show is Viewpoint. You would do well to subscribe to this channel on YouTube, Veegil Media. Thanks for watching.